Hi, Michael Mamoff, card-carrying Osmosoft member. This is TiddlyWiki. As you can see, it's just a normal website when it's running on the server, TiddlyWiki.com. And we can click around and there's different links. And there's a link to another web page, which I've just opened in a new tab. And where it gets really interesting is when we start to download. So I've just downloaded this to my hard drive here. And I can then open it up. And now I've opened it, I'm actually running more or less the same document, but I'm running it on my local file system, so it's running on a file URL. And what's very cool about this is I can actually save it. So if I do a little test here and save changes, it comes up and asks me if I give it permission to do that because it's saving to my local drive, but it's just done it, and I can verify that. If I reload the page, you can see that my change is still there. So what's really interesting to me about TiddlyWiki is that it supports a very happy path from novice to expert. It doesn't say there are just programmers on one side and new users on another, and the two can't actually meet anywhere. If you're a new user, you have to go cap in hand and ask the programmer to make something a little bit more advanced for you. TiddlyWiki, in a similar way that spreadsheets are often used, it supports this massive middle ground of people who want to just customize, do little innovations and tweaking without having to go and launch some big new software project. So I'll show you what I mean by that. As a new user, I still get a lot of value just from the TiddlyWiki application itself. So I can just sort of use it as a personal notebook, a little bit like the way I might use a text file, and just say, keep my to-do list, and I need to go shopping, I need to go out, I need to do the bills, and I might tag this as tasks. So now I've got this document, I can save it, and when I reload it, it's still going to be here. We can organize this in different ways. I can look at all the tiddlers tagged tasks, which is just this one at the moment. And so it's a useful way to document things just by organizing things according to these tiddlers. And then we can start to customize things. So then we start on our road towards an advanced user, and where we end up on that road doesn't really matter. We might just keep it as just as simple as this, or we might start to just make a few little tweaks. So if you know how to do this sort of thing, you just go into the list of what are called shadowed tiddlers, and you can start playing around with this. So we can change the title up there to organization list. And now I've changed the title, and I could change the subtitle as well if I want. Right, so we've changed the way that looks. If I know what I'm doing, I can start to play around further, and we can start to get a little bit more complicated here. And you can see here that this is using a color palette for different things, and same with the CSS. So I can start to get a bit fancier and start playing around with the color palette as well. And I can make primary pale becomes let's say FFF, or let's say FFO, and primary mid becomes 880, and primary dark becomes 330. And now you can see I've just changed the way the TiddlyWiki looks straight away. I should also change primary light, which I missed out there. So let's just make that BBO for now. So we can see we've totally changed the color scheme. We can go further with that. We can then get even more advanced, and we can start playing around with the style sheet, and we can actually introduce the way these things look and change those things. So in the case of, I might want to make the heading font style : italic, and that should work, although maybe I've done a bad thing. No, let me, without going into too much detail, let me just check. Let's make it font weight bold or something like that instead. Let's just do this for everything, just to prove the point. Oops, typo, that's not going to help. Font weight bold. Okay, so now we can see how we're changing everything in the document. Or I could just do body background : yellow. Okay, so we can very easily make changes that affect the whole document, and in most cases they're refreshed straight away. In other cases you sometimes have to do a save changes and reload the page. So that's a bit of a view about how you can start to customize things without really having any kind of programming knowledge. We started to delve into a bit of programming knowledge at the last point when we started to look at the CSS. In similar vein, we can also do things like change the way that the tiddlers are presented. So each of these tiddlers has got, you can see it's got a title, name, it's got different things like a toolbar up the top, and it's got tags. We can change the way that looks as well. So we can go into what's called the view template, and each of these things is represented by a macro. And we can introduce new macros if we want, or we can change the existing look and feel as well. So if I want, I can add a heading above every tiddler that says this is a tiddler, and we can see here now that's been added there to that particular tiddler, and it should actually be added to all of the tiddlers. So we can see all of these different tiddlers we've created, like our task thing from back before. We've created it, and we're changing the way these things look. And once you go down this path for a while and you customize and customize, you'll also find that you can actually start to do some programming as well. So if you really want to get advanced and you actually want to do some JavaScript to start tweaking these things, that's great too. And the nice thing about TiddlyWiki is that everything runs in the browser, and you can actually change the code in your browser, although really for serious development you can set up a nicer sort of command line environment for coding like most programmers are familiar with. But for doing basic tweaks, that's another thing that's great, is you just get to dip your toes into the water here a bit and just do a little bit of coding just to tweak a few things. So I'll show you that now. If I go and let's see, we can do an intro, and let's just do something real simple. Let's just do an alert, and all we have to do is we have to tag it a system config, which is basically saying that it's a plugin, so it runs when the system starts up, and save it to the local file. So all this is still inside a local file on my hard drive. Now I push reload, and we can see that we've got some JavaScript actually running there. And what we also find is that we can do macros very easily, so we can start to build up these reusable components that other people can use. And there are macros, like there's a macro called tiddler, which basically will just show the contents of another tiddler. And so we can see here, now we're just showing the contents of that to do. And you can write your own custom macros to do all sorts of things. And that's how you start to get whole applications that get to be built up. So we can see an application that's got lots of different things in it. What's an example? If we look for Tiddly Pocketbook, for instance, which I've seen yesterday. So Tiddly Pocketbook, all of these things are just tiddlers, and Paul's put things together so that you can easily view the tiddlers in different ways, and you can have any kind of interactivity that they might be built in. I can actually start to explore how Paul's actually built this. He might have actually disabled this. I'm not sure if it's actually going to be possible. Yeah, no, he's disabled it, and I haven't got a Firebug running, so I can't actually show you that. But what we can do is we can, look in the actual tiddlers. So most TiddlyWikis have got a way to get a list of tiddlers and shadows are the kind of plugins. And basically what you can do is you can see which tiddlers are tagged as system config, and those are the things that will basically show you what the kind of behavior is for the TiddlyWiki. And that's really about it. The only other thing I wanted to mention actually is the backstage. So this is also where you can do, where in Tiddly Pocketbook, that's why I couldn't actually do it, because he's actually made it more customized. But in this case, the standard thing is you can actually import tiddlers from other places, and because the mode of reuse for a TiddlyWiki is just based on a single tiddler, it's quite an easy modular format. So if I want to, I can use something called Tiddly Tools, and we can then we'll let it do it, and we can actually get back all of the tiddlers that are on Tiddly Tools, which is a site I happen to know about that contains a lot of different plugins, and each of the plugins is just simply a tiddler. So if I want to use any of these plugins in my own site, I can just take them. So I can take this digital clock plugin, for instance, and just import it And now that's there, and I can use that on my own site, all of that code, and just use it that way. Tiddler digital clog, and I can see all the code, and that's it. Thank you.